The Galactic Council's testing facility on Kepler 442 hummed with activity as representatives from 12 different species gathered to witness the latest batch of endurance trials. The sterile white walls reflected the harsh artificial lighting, casting sharp shadows across the observation deck where alien dignitaries sat in their specialized environmental suits. Commander Zector of the Vorthan Empire adjusted his breathing apparatus and checked the atmospheric readings on his wrist display. The facility maintained a standard oxygen-nitrogen mix that most species could tolerate, but the gravity here was deliberately set to 1.2 times standard galactic measurement, challenging for most beings. "The human delegation has arrived," announced Dr. Silith, the facility's chief administrator. Her crystalline body chimed softly as she moved, each step creating a musical note that helped her species communicate complex emotions. Today, her tones carried skepticism mixed with curiosity. Through the reinforced viewing window, they watched as a small transport shuttle landed on the facility's docking platform. The airlock cycled, and 3 figures emerged. 2 appeared to be standard human specimens, tall, lean, dressed in the typical utilitarian jumpsuits favored by human explorers. But the 3rd figure made several aliens lean forward in their seats. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with silver-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her face bore the lines of advanced age by human standards, and she moved with the careful but confident gait of someone who had seen many decades. She carried what appeared to be a large knitted bag over one shoulder and wore what the humans called a cardigan over her jumpsuit. "That cannot be their test subject," rumbled General Kozak of the Thurian hegemony. His forearms crossed in disbelief as his red compound eyes focused on the elderly human woman. "The trials are designed to break seasoned warriors. We've seen professional soldiers from 6 different military forces fail within the first week." Commander Zector nodded grimly. He had personally endured the trials himself 3 solar cycles ago, lasting a respectable 43 days before the combination of isolation, environmental hazards, and psychological pressure had broken his resolve. It had been considered an outstanding performance, one that earned him significant respect among his peers and helped secure his current position. "Perhaps they misunderstood the requirements," suggested Ambassador Quilana from the Ethereal Collective. Her translucent form shimmered with uncertainty. "The human brain chemistry is known to be unusual, but surely they would not send an elderly civilian to face trials that have defeated trained military personnel." Dr. Silith's chimes took on a more analytical tone. "According to the documentation provided by the Human Exploration Authority, the subject is designated as Eleanor Margaret Hoffman, age 73 standard years, retired educator and grandmother of 6. Her medical clearance indicates she is in good health for her age group, but shows no evidence of military training or enhanced modifications." The assembled aliens exchanged glances that, despite their varied physiologies, all conveyed the same message: confusion and disbelief. The endurance trials had been established 47 years ago as a way for species to demonstrate their worthiness for inclusion in the Galactic Council's most sensitive missions. The challenges were comprehensive: physical endurance, psychological resilience, adaptability to hostile environments, and the ability to maintain rational decision-making under extreme stress. The facility itself was a marvel of engineering, capable of simulating hundreds of different planetary environments. Test subjects were placed in a sealed habitat and subjected to an escalating series of challenges over time. Temperature extremes, atmospheric changes, limited food and water, equipment failures, and complete isolation from outside contact. Most beings broke within the first few days. The record was held by a Vorthan Special Forces operative, who had lasted 51 days before requesting extraction. Commander Zector had volunteered for the trials as a young officer, eager to prove himself worthy of advancement. The first week had been manageable, uncomfortable, but bearable. The habitat provided basic necessities, and he had trained extensively for such conditions. But as days stretched into weeks, the psychological pressure mounted. The walls seemed to close in. Equipment began failing at precisely calculated intervals. The temperature fluctuated wildly. Food supplies dwindled. The silence was absolute, except for the sound of his own breathing and heartbeat. By day 30, he had been talking to himself constantly just to hear a voice. By day 40, he had begun seeing shapes that weren't there. When he finally activated the emergency extraction signal on day 43, He had been found curled in a corner of the habitat, rocking back and forth and muttering prayers to ancestors he hadn't thought about in years. The experience had been transformative. He had emerged with a profound respect for the trials and a deep understanding of his own limitations. It had also earned him the respect of his superiors and peers. 43 days was an exceptional performance that few could match. And now the humans were sending a grandmother. Perhaps this is some form of cultural ritual, suggested Dr. Silith. Some species have traditions where elders are honored through ceremonial participation in important events, even if they are not expected to actually complete the challenges. The humans indicated that they expect their representative to complete the full trial period, replied the facility's AI system in its neutral synthetic voice. They have declined to provide a backup candidate and have specifically requested that Alina Margaret Hoffman be allowed to attempt the maximum duration trial. The maximum duration trial was 6 months, 180 standard galactic days. No being had ever requested it, let alone completed it. Most species considered even attempting such a duration to be a form of madness. 6 months, General Kozak's voice rose to an incredulous pitch. The psychological damage alone would be irreversible, and at her age, the physical stress could be fatal. The humans have provided extensive medical documentation, Dr. Silith chimed in reassuring tones. They claim their subject is capable of the attempt and have assumed all responsibility for potential negative outcomes. Through the viewing window, they watched as the human delegation was escorted through the facility's orientation chambers. The elderly woman, Alina, appeared to be taking careful notes on a small device while listening to the briefing. She occasionally nodded and asked questions that the observers couldn't hear, but that seemed to surprise the facility staff providing the tour. What could they possibly hope to gain? Wondered Ambassador Quilana. If she fails quickly, it will be seen as a lack of seriousness regarding the trials. If she suffers harm, it could damage human standing in the galactic community. Commander Zector studied the human grandmother more carefully. Despite her age, there was something in her posture, in the way she moved and observed her surroundings, that suggested a quiet confidence. She didn't seem nervous or overwhelmed by the facility's imposing atmosphere. If anything, she appeared to be treating the whole experience with the kind of practical assessment one might use when inspecting a new piece of equipment. Perhaps, he said slowly, we are underestimating human psychology. Their species has shown unusual resilience in several documented encounters. Their pain tolerance and adaptability exceed most galactic averages. But this is an elderly civilian, General Kozak protested, not one of their trained soldiers or explorers. The human delegation had completed their tour and was now approaching the habitat chamber. Through the facility's communication system, they could hear Alina speaking with her companions. Now don't you boys worry about me. Her voice carried the warm, authoritative tone that many species associated with maternal figures. I've raised 6 children, survived 3 teenage grandchildren visiting for entire summers, and managed a classroom of 38-year-olds for 42 years. I think I can handle a little quiet time by myself. One of her companions, a younger human with the insignia of the Human Exploration Authority, looked concerned. Mrs. Hoffman, you understand that once the trial begins, we cannot provide any assistance or contact for the duration. If you activate the emergency signal, the trial ends immediately. Alina adjusted her cardigan and smiled. Dear, I once went 8 months without adult conversation when my youngest had colic and my husband was deployed. I managed just fine. Besides, I brought plenty to keep myself busy. She patted her knitted bag affectionately, and several aliens in the observation deck exchanged puzzled looks. What could an elderly human possibly have brought that would help her endure 6 months of isolation and systematic stress? The habitat chamber door sealed with a resonant clang that always reminded Commander Zector of a tomb closing. Environmental systems activated, and the chamber's atmosphere was adjusted to the initial trial parameters: slightly elevated temperature, reduced oxygen content, and increased humidity. Not dangerous, but uncomfortable enough to begin the psychological pressure. Alina looked around her new environment with the same calm assessment she had shown during the tour. The habitat was a circular chamber approximately 50 meters in diameter, with walls that could display various environmental scenes or remain blank. Basic furnishings included a simple bed, a water recycling system, food storage and preparation area, exercise equipment, and a waste disposal system. Everything was functional but deliberately Spartan. She walked slowly around the space, running her hand along the walls and testing various pieces of equipment. Then she sat down on the bed, opened her knitted bag, and began removing items that made the assembled aliens lean forward in fascination. Balls of yarn in various colors, knitting needles, what appeared to be a collection of thin books, several small packets that might have been seeds, a compact sewing kit, a few small tools whose purpose wasn't immediately clear. "She's brought craft supplies." Dr. Silith's chimes carried overtones of bewilderment. Alina arranged her materials neatly on a small shelf, then sat back down and began working with the yarn and needles. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, creating what appeared to be the beginning of a garment. "The trial hasn't even begun properly," muttered General Kozak. "Wait until the real stress starts. Wait until the temperature drops to near freezing, or the food supplies are contaminated, or the lights begin failing randomly." Commander Zector found himself oddly fascinated by the humans' calm demeanor. Most test subjects spent their first few hours packing nervously, testing every system repeatedly, or engaging in intensive physical exercise to burn off anxiety. Alina simply sat and knitted, occasionally humming softly to herself. "Perhaps," said Ambassador Quilana thoughtfully, "we should observe carefully. Human psychology has surprised us before in other contexts. Their approach to problem-solving often involves strategies we do not immediately recognize as logical." As the first day progressed, Alina established what appeared to be a routine. She exercised for a moderate period, not the frantic physical activity most subjects engaged in, but steady, purposeful movement. She prepared her food carefully, taking time to make it as palatable as possible with the limited ingredients available. She spent considerable time working with her crafts, and in the evening she appeared to be reading. When the lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, she arranged her bedding neatly, said what might have been a prayer or simply spoken good nights to people who weren't there, and settled down to sleep with apparent ease. "Remarkable," murmured Dr. Silith. "Most subjects experience severe insomnia during their first week. The stress response typically makes rest nearly impossible." "It's only the first day," Commander Zector reminded them, but even he had to admit that Alina's adaptation seemed unusually smooth. As the observation deck's various alien representatives began to disperse for their own rest cycles, each carried with them a growing sense of curiosity about the elderly human grandmother who had volunteered for an ordeal that had broken some of the galaxy's finest warriors. None of them suspected that they were about to witness something that would fundamentally change their understanding of human endurance, resilience, and the quiet strength that could be found in the most unexpected places. 3 weeks into Alina's trial, the facility's staff had developed an unusual daily routine. Instead of the typical cursory monitoring that most endurance tests received after the first few days, teams of researchers, military observers, and curious diplomats found themselves gathering regularly to watch the elderly human's progress. Commander Zector had become a daily visitor to the observation deck. What had started as casual interest in the unusual test subject had evolved into something approaching fascination. Alina's behavior patterns defied every predictive model the facility's computers had generated for human psychological responses under stress. "Temperature dropped to 2 degrees below freezing last night," reported Dr. Silith, her crystalline form chiming with notes of bewilderment. "Standard protocol suggests subjects should be showing signs of severe physical distress, increased caloric consumption, and elevated stress hormones." She knitted herself a sweater. Through the viewing window, they could see Alina calmly preparing her morning meal. The habitat's food replicator had been programmed to provide increasingly unpalatable rations as part of the psychological pressure campaign. What had started as bland but edible protein paste had evolved into a gray substance that smelled faintly of sulfur and had the consistency of wet cardboard. Most test subjects had reached the point of choking down the minimum necessary calories to survive. Alina was stirring something into her portion that made it steam appealingly. She had somehow transformed the revolting substance into what appeared to be a breakfast that she actually enjoyed. "How is she doing that?" demanded General Kozak, his 4 arms gesticulating in frustration. "The replicator is providing standard stress rations. There are no additional ingredients available in the habitat. Dr. Silith consulted her data pad. Analysis of her craft's supplies revealed several packets of what human documentation identifies as herbs and spices, apparently common seasonings used in food preparation on Earth. Our xenobiology department categorized them as harmless, so they were permitted. She smuggled cooking supplies into an endurance trial. Ambassador Quilana's translucent form shimmered with what might have been admiration. That demonstrates remarkable foresight. Commander Zector studied Alina's movements as she ate her transformed meal. She had spread one of her knitted creations, now recognizable as a blanket, across her lap and was reading while she ate. Her posture remained relaxed, her movements efficient but unhurried. Nothing in her behavior suggested the creeping desperation that typically began to manifest in test subjects around the 2-week mark. "What is she reading?" he asked. Dr. Silith adjusted her sensors to achieve better resolution. "The items appear to be what humans call books, physical information storage media using processed plant matter. Our scans indicate they contain various types of text. Some appear to be instructional manuals, others seem to be fictional narratives." "She brought entertainment?" General Kozak's voice climbed toward what might have been hysteria. "This is supposed to be an ordeal that tests the absolute limits of psychological endurance, and she brought reading material." Through the habitat's audio pickups, they could hear Alina humming softly as she cleaned her eating utensils. The melody was unfamiliar but pleasant, something with a lilting quality that several observers found oddly soothing. "Computer," Commander Zector addressed the facility's AI system, "provide analysis of subject stress indicators." Subject Alina Hoffman continues to display stress hormone levels within normal parameters for relaxed humans, the synthetic voice reported. Blood pressure, heart rate, and brain activity all indicate stable psychological state. Sleep patterns remain regular and restorative. Physical health indicators show slight improvement from baseline measurements. "Improvement?" Dr. Silith's chimes rose to alarmed pitches. "How is she healthier than when she started?" "Subject has maintained consistent exercise routine adapted to available space and equipment. Dietary modifications appear to have enhanced nutritional absorption from provided rations. Cardiovascular efficiency has increased by approximately 8% over baseline measurements." The assembled aliens stared through the viewing window at Alina, who was now settling into what appeared to be her regular crafting time. She had completed the sweater and was working on what looked like a hat to match. Her hands moved with practiced precision, creating neat, even stitches while she occasionally glanced at one of her books. "This is unprecedented," admitted Dr. Silith. "We have 3 weeks of data showing a test subject who is not merely surviving the trials, but appears to be thriving under conditions designed to break psychological resistance." "Perhaps the stress protocols aren't functioning correctly," suggested General Kozak. "The environmental controls, the food quality, the isolation, something must be malfunctioning." "All systems are operating within normal parameters," the facility AI confirmed. "Stress protocols are functioning as designed. Subject is experiencing the same environmental challenges as all previous test subjects." Commander Zector thought back to his own experience in the habitat. By day 21, he had been struggling to maintain basic hygiene routines. The constant low-level discomfort, the bland food, the unchanging environment, and most especially the complete isolation had begun to erode his psychological stability. He had found himself checking and rechecking equipment compulsively, packing for hours, and talking to himself just to hear a voice. Alina appeared to have established a sustainable routine that not only maintained her psychological balance, but seemed to provide genuine satisfaction. She woke at consistent times, exercised regularly, prepared and ate her meals with care, engaged in productive activities, read for both education and entertainment, and maintained what appeared to be a meditation or reflection period each evening. "She's treating it like a vacation," realized Ambassador Quilana suddenly. "The isolation, the simple routine, the freedom from external demands, from her perspective, this might actually be enjoyable." Dr. Silith's analysis chimes took on contemplative overtones. "Human social structures often place significant obligations on individuals, particularly females in caretaker roles. For a being who has spent decades managing the needs of offspring, students, and extended family networks, Complete freedom from external demands might indeed represent a positive experience. Through the viewing window, Alina had finished the hat and was examining it with obvious satisfaction. She tried it on, adjusted it slightly, then set it aside and began working on what appeared to be mittens to complete the set. Her expression was peaceful, almost meditative. "But the isolation," protested General Kozak. "No contact with other beings, no social interaction, no shared experiences. How is she managing the psychological pressure of complete solitude?" "Perhaps," said Commander Zector slowly, "we are making assumptions about human social needs based on our own species' requirements. Humans have demonstrated unusual individual psychological resilience in other contexts. Maybe their tolerance for isolation exceeds our models." As if to underscore his point, Alina began speaking aloud. The observers quickly adjusted the audio feeds to hear what might be the first sign of psychological breakdown. Talking to oneself was often an early indicator of deteriorating mental state. "Now let's see," she was saying in conversational tones. "If I start the decreases here, I should have a nice fitted cuff by the time I reach the thumb gusset. Margaret always did prefer her mittens snug around the wrists." She continued talking as she worked, maintaining a running commentary about her knitting project that included references to various people who weren't present. But rather than the disconnected rambling of someone losing touch with reality, her speech patterns remained organized and purposeful. "She's not talking to herself," realized Dr. Silith with sudden insight. "She's talking to the people she's making things for. In her mind, she's still connected to her social network through the act of creating gifts for them." "Remarkable adaptation," murmured Ambassador Quilana. "She has found a way to maintain social connection even in complete isolation by engaging in activities that reinforce her relationships with absent individuals." Commander Zector felt a strange sense of respect growing for the elderly human. What had initially seemed like naive preparation, bringing craft supplies to an endurance trial, was revealing itself to be sophisticated psychological strategy. Alina had anticipated the challenges she would face and had brought tools not just for physical comfort, but for maintaining her mental and emotional stability. "How many items is she making?" he asked. Dr. Silith consulted her observations. "She has completed the sweater, hat, and is working on mittens. Scans of her remaining materials suggest she has sufficient supplies for numerous additional projects. She also appears to be growing something in small containers near the light sources." "Growing?" General Kozak sounded incredulous. "The seed packets she brought appear to contain various edible plants. She has established a small garden using containers improvised from habitat materials. Early growth stages are visible." Through the viewing window, they could see small green sprouts emerging from containers arranged on a shelf near the habitat's main lighting panel. Alina had apparently created a miniature garden that would eventually provide fresh food to supplement the increasingly unpalatable rations. "She's not just enduring the trial," Commander Zector said with growing amazement. "She's improving her environment, creating projects that provide long-term satisfaction, and maintaining psychological connections to her social network. She has essentially turned a trial designed to break psychological resistance into a productive retreat." The facility's AI system chimed for attention. "Observation. Subject's behavioral patterns suggest she may be capable of extending her trial participation significantly beyond typical parameters. Current stress indicators and resource management strategies indicate potential for long-duration success." Dr. Silith's harmonic tones carried notes of disbelief. "Are you suggesting she might actually complete the maximum trial duration?" "Current data trends support that possibility," the AI confirmed. "Subject appears to have achieved sustainable psychological and physical equilibrium within the trial environment." The assembled observers fell into thoughtful silence as they watched Alina finish the first mitten and begin work on its partner. Her movements remained steady and purposeful, her expression calm and focused. Occasionally, she glanced at her small garden, checking the progress of her sprouting plants with the satisfied expression of someone watching expected positive results. Commander Zector thought again about his own experience in the habitat, about the gradual erosion of hope and purpose that had eventually driven him to activate the emergency extraction signal. Alina appeared to be experiencing something entirely different, not gradual deterioration, but steady adaptation and even improvement. We may need to fundamentally revise our understanding of human psychological endurance, he said finally. This individual is demonstrating capabilities that exceed our most optimistic projections for her species. And she's only getting started, added Ambassador Quilana with what might have been wonder. If she can maintain this pattern for 6 months. None of them finished the thought, but all of them understood its implications. If a leaner could complete the maximum duration trial, and do so while maintaining not just psychological stability but apparent contentment, it would establish new standards for individual endurance that might reshape how the galaxy viewed human capabilities. As the observation deck gradually emptied for the day cycle, each departing alien carried with them a growing sense that they might be witnessing something unprecedented. Not just an unusual test result, but a demonstration of capabilities that could change fundamental assumptions about what beings were capable of enduring, and perhaps more importantly, how they chose to endure it. 2 months into Alina's trial, word had spread throughout the galactic diplomatic community. What had begun as a routine endurance test had evolved into something approaching a cultural phenomenon. Delegates from species that had never shown interest in the trials were requesting observation privileges. Scientists were arriving from across the sector to study what they were calling the Hoffman effect. Commander Zector had been officially assigned to coordinate the growing number of observers. The facility's standard observation deck had been expanded twice to accommodate the crowds of beings who came daily to watch the elderly human grandmother who had turned a psychological endurance test into what increasingly resembled a master class in sustainable living. Food quality reduced to minimum nutritional standards 3 days ago, reported Dr. Silith, her crystalline form resonating with tones of professional fascination mixed with personal bewilderment. Standard response would be increasing desperation, hoarding behavior, and significant psychological distress. She made soup. Through the viewing window, Alina could be seen ladling something from a container that steamed appetizingly. Her small garden had flourished beyond all expectations. Green plants cascaded from improvised shelves and hanging baskets she had constructed using materials ingeniously repurposed from the habitat's furnishings. The gray sterility of the trial chamber had been transformed into something that resembled a cozy living space. "Explain the soup," demanded General Kozak, who had become so invested in Alina's progress that he had rearranged his military duties to maintain daily observation schedules. Dr. Silith consulted her data streams. Analysis indicates she has been saving small portions of daily rations for several weeks, allowing natural fermentation processes to develop complex flavors. Combined with herbs from her garden and seasonings from her original supplies, she has created what appears to be a nutritionally dense and palatable meal from ingredients that individually were designed to be barely tolerable. She's been planning this for weeks. Ambassador Quilana's form shimmered with something approaching reverence. While consuming reduced rations, she saved portions for future use. That demonstrates extraordinary delayed gratification capacity and long-term strategic thinking. Commander Zector studied Alina's movements as she ate her soup. She had made herself a bowl from clay she had somehow created using materials from the habitat's waste processing system, another innovation that had surprised the facility's engineers. Her posture remained relaxed and comfortable as she sat surrounded by her various projects. The knitted items had multiplied impressively. Sweaters, hats, mittens, scarves, and what appeared to be blankets were neatly arranged around the habitat. Some were clearly finished products, while others were works in progress. Alina seemed to maintain several simultaneous projects, switching between them as her mood or energy levels dictated. "Computer," Commander Zector addressed the facility's AI, "provide current psychological assessment." Subject Alina Hoffman continues to display optimal psychological markers for her species, the synthetic voice reported. Stress hormones remain at baseline levels. Sleep quality has improved from initial measurements. Cognitive function tests indicate enhanced performance in areas of problem-solving and creative thinking. Enhanced performance. Dr. Silith's harmonic confusion reached new pitch levels. How is that possible under trial conditions? Working hypothesis suggests that removal from external stressors and availability of unstructured time for preferred activities has created optimal conditions for cognitive flourishing, the AI explained. Subject appears to be experiencing what human psychology literature terms flow states for extended periods daily. Through the audio pickups, they could hear Alina humming as she worked on what appeared to be an intricate pattern in her current knitting project. The melody was different from previous days. She seemed to have an extensive repertoire of songs that she cycled through depending on her activities. She's happy, realized Ambassador Quilana suddenly. Not just psychologically stable or successfully enduring, she's genuinely content, perhaps even more so than when she began. The observation deck had filled with the day's complement of visitors. Scientists from the Ethereal Collective had set up specialized equipment to monitor Alina's energy patterns. Military advisors from 3 different alliance structures were taking detailed notes. A team of xenopsychologists had established what amounted to a permanent research station dedicated to analyzing her behavioral patterns. "Any updates on the Galactic response to this situation?" Commander Zector asked Dr. Silith quietly. "The Galactic Council has formally requested a comprehensive report," she chimed in subdued tones. "Several member species are questioning the validity of endurance trials as currently structured. There are discussions about whether the trials actually test the qualities they were designed to measure." "And the humans?" "The Human Exploration Authority has been remarkably quiet. They acknowledge receiving reports on Alina's progress, but have declined to provide commentary on her performance or methodologies." Through the viewing window, Alina had finished her soup and was settling into what had become her afternoon crafting period. Today, she appeared to be working on something different, not clothing or blankets, but small decorative items that were difficult to identify from the observation deck. "What is she making now?" asked General Kozak. Dr. Silith enhanced her sensors for better resolution. "The items appear to be small decorative objects. Analysis suggests they may be toys or gift items. Purpose is unclear, but construction quality is extremely high." As they watched, Alina held up one of the completed items, a small knitted animal of some kind, carefully shaped and detailed. She examined it with obvious satisfaction, then set it aside with several others and began work on a new one. "She's making toys," said Commander Zector with sudden understanding. "Gifts for her grandchildren." The simplicity and profound optimism of the action struck the assembled aliens with unexpected force. Alina wasn't just enduring the trial or even thriving during it. She was using the time to create gifts for loved ones, maintaining her role as a grandmother even in complete isolation. 6 grandchildren, Dr. Silith confirmed, consulting Alina's biographical data. She appears to be creating individualized items for each one. They watched in fascination as Alina worked with obvious pleasure on each small toy, taking care to make each one unique. Her movements held the confident precision of someone who had made countless such items over the years, but also the special attention that came from creating something for a specific beloved person. "The psychological implications are staggering," murmured one of the xenopsychologists. "She has maintained not only individual psychological stability, but has preserved her social identity and relationships despite complete physical isolation. She exists in this space not as an isolated individual enduring hardship, but as a connected member of a social network temporarily engaged in productive activity." "Is that why she's succeeding where others have failed?" asked Ambassador Quilana. Commander Zector thought about his own experience in the habitat, about the gradual sense of disconnection and loss of purpose that had eventually overwhelmed him. Most test subjects focus on endurance, on surviving each day until they can return to their normal lives. Alina appears to be living her normal life, just in a different location. As if to demonstrate his point, Alina paused in her toy-making to check on her garden. She carefully tended several plants, harvesting small amounts of fresh greens that she added to a collection container. Her movements showed the practiced efficiency of someone who had been gardening for decades. "The garden exceeds all projections for plant growth in artificial environments," noted one of the facility's botanical specialists. "She has somehow optimized growing conditions beyond what our best agricultural scientists achieved in similar spaces." "How?" demanded General Kozak. "Improvised enhancements to the lighting system using reflective materials. Carefully managed compost system using organic waste. Precision watering schedule that maximizes plant health while conserving water resources. And something our analysis can't quantify, what human literature refers to as a green thumb." Alina had returned to her toy-making, but was now singing softly as she worked. The melody was different again, something with a gentle rhythm that seemed perfectly suited to the careful, repetitive motions of her crafting. "Does she know we're watching?" asked one of the newer observers. Dr. Silith consulted her records. Standard trial protocol prohibits informing subjects about observation procedures. However, Alina's educational background includes child psychology and classroom management. She would likely understand that her behavior is being monitored, even if she doesn't know the extent. So she might be aware that her methods are being studied. Possible, but analysis of her behavior patterns suggests no performance modifications or artificial behaviors. Her actions appear consistently authentic to her established personality profile. The afternoon progressed with Alina moving through what had become her established routine. Crafting time transitioned to reading period, then to physical exercise, then to meal preparation and evening reflection time. Each activity was approached with the same calm efficiency and apparent satisfaction. 3 months remaining, Commander Zector said quietly, if current trends continue. She'll complete the trial, Dr. Silith finished. Not just complete it, but complete it while demonstrating psychological and physical improvements from baseline measurements. The implications for our understanding of human capabilities go far beyond anything we anticipated when we established these trials, agreed Ambassador Quilana. We may need to fundamentally revise our assessment criteria for all species, not just humans. As the observation deck began to empty for the evening cycle, the assembled beings carried with them a growing sense that they were witnessing something that transcended a simple test of endurance. Alina's success was challenging fundamental assumptions about resilience, adaptability, and the nature of psychological strength. More than that, her approach to the trial, transforming an ordeal into a productive retreat, maintaining social connections across isolation, and finding joy in simple activities, was providing a masterclass in human wisdom that had implications far beyond military endurance or diplomatic qualification. Commander Zector remained at the viewing window longer than the others, watching as Alina settled into her evening routine. She had arranged her living space with care, surrounding herself with her various projects and creations. The sterile trial chamber had been transformed into something that resembled a comfortable home, filled with the products of her care and creativity. As she prepared for sleep, Alina folded one of her completed blankets and arranged several of the small toys where she could see them. Then she sat quietly for several minutes in what appeared to be meditation or prayer, her expression peaceful and content. 3 more months. If she could maintain this pattern, she would not only complete the maximum trial duration, but would do so in a way that redefined everything the galaxy thought it knew about endurance, resilience, and the remarkable capabilities of an elderly human grandmother who had turned the ultimate test of individual survival into a celebration of creativity, connection, and quiet strength. 4.5 months into Alina's trial, the Galactic Council's testing facility had become an unofficial pilgrimage site. Delegations arrived daily from across the galaxy, not just to observe the unprecedented endurance performance, but to study what had become known throughout diplomatic channels as the Alina Method. Commander Zector now held the official title of Director of Human Studies, a position created specifically to manage the growing interest in Alina's trial. The observation deck had been expanded into a full research complex, with dedicated spaces for the dozens of scientific teams studying various aspects of her performance. Day 137, announced Dr. Silith, her crystalline form now permanently positioned at the primary observation station. All stress protocols have been implemented to maximum parameters. Subject continues to demonstrate not only psychological stability, but active flourishing under conditions that would break most trained military personnel. Viewing window revealed a habitat that bore no resemblance to the sterile test chamber it had been 5 months earlier. Alina had transformed the space into something that looked more like a thriving homestead than an endurance trial facility. Her garden had expanded to cover nearly a quarter of the available space, with climbing plants creating natural partitions and privacy areas. Handmade furniture crafted from repurposed habitat materials provided comfortable seating and workspaces. Food quality is now at minimum survivable nutritional content, reported the facility's nutritionist, a multi-armed being whose species specialized in dietary science. The provided rations are essentially flavorless protein paced with minimal vitamin supplementation. Standard projection indicates subject should be experiencing malnutrition symptoms and severe food-related psychological stress. Through the viewing window, Alina could be seen preparing what appeared to be an elaborate meal. Steam rose from multiple containers, and the way she moved suggested someone preparing a feast rather than struggling with barely edible rations. "She's hosting a dinner party," realized Ambassador Quilana with bemused wonder. "For herself." Indeed, Alina had set her handmade table with care, arranging several of her crafted items as decorations. She had prepared multiple dishes using ingredients from her garden, seasonings from her original supplies, and creative modifications to the basic rations. As they watched, she seated herself at the table and began eating with obvious enjoyment, occasionally nodding as if responding to conversation partners who weren't there. "She's not alone in her mind," observed one of the xenopsychologists who had been studying Alina's behavior patterns. "She has maintained social connections by creating elaborate internal scenarios where she interacts with her family and friends. But rather than being signs of psychological breakdown, these interactions appear to be conscious, controlled, and psychologically beneficial." "Explain," requested General Kazak, who had been promoted twice since Alina's trial began, largely due to his detailed reports on human psychological capabilities. "Most beings experiencing isolation-induced hallucinations lose the ability to distinguish between internal and external reality," the psychologist explained. "Alina appears to be deliberately engaging in what humans call imagination, consciously created mental scenarios that provide social and emotional benefits while maintaining clear awareness of their fictional nature." Dr. Silith's harmonic analysis reached contemplative frequencies. "So she's essentially hosting dinner parties with people who exist in her memory and imagination, but she knows they're not actually present." "Correct. It's a sophisticated coping mechanism that allows her to maintain social connections and emotional satisfaction without losing touch with reality. She's essentially created a rich internal social life that sustains her psychological well-being." Commander Zector studied Alina's behavior more closely. As she ate, she was indeed conversing, asking questions, listening attentively, laughing at responses only she could hear. But her body language and expressions suggested someone fully in control of the interaction, not someone experiencing involuntary hallucinations. "This level of conscious imagination control is remarkable," he said. "She's essentially created an on-demand social network that she can activate whenever she needs emotional connection." "And the crafting activities support this," added another researcher. "Each item she creates is made for a specific person in her social network. The act of creation maintains her emotional bonds even across physical separation." Alina had finished her elaborate meal and was now settling into her evening crafting time. Tonight's project appeared to be something larger than her usual items, possibly another blanket or perhaps clothing for an adult, rather than the toys she had been making for her grandchildren. "What's the current count on completed projects?" asked Commander Zector. Dr. Silith consulted her records. 47 completed items, 12 sweaters, 8 blankets, 15 small toys, 7 hats, 5 sets of mittens, and various decorative objects. Quality analysis indicates professional-level craftsmanship throughout. Several items demonstrate techniques and patterns that our cultural analysis teams identify as extremely sophisticated. "She's been using the time to perfect her skills," realized Ambassador Quilana, "not just maintaining her abilities but actively improving them." Through the audio pickups, they could hear Alina humming a complex melody as she worked on her current project. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, creating intricate patterns that spoke to decades of experience and considerable artistic ability. "The psychological benefits of creative activity cannot be overstated," commented one of the research team leaders. "Alina has essentially created a continuous state of what human psychology terms flow, complete absorption in meaningful activity that provides intrinsic satisfaction." "But it's more than that," observed Commander Zector. "She's not just keeping busy or filling time. Every activity serves multiple purposes. The crafting maintains her social connections and provides skill development. The gardening ensures nutritional variety and connects her to natural processes. Even her elaborate meal preparations transform necessary survival activities into sources of genuine pleasure." "Optimal psychological functioning," agreed the xenopsychologist. She has achieved something most beings never experience even under ideal conditions, a life perfectly aligned with her values, interests, and natural rhythms. The facility's AI system activated with its daily analysis update. Subject continues to exceed all baseline parameters for psychological and physical health. Cardiovascular fitness has improved by 23%. Cognitive performance scores indicate enhanced memory, problem-solving ability, and creative thinking. Stress hormone levels remain below average for relaxed humans in optimal environments. She's healthier than when she started, Dr. Silith chimed in amazed overtones. After 4.5 months of trial conditions designed to break psychological resistance, she has achieved better physical and mental health than when she entered the facility. General Kozak shook his head in disbelief. This challenges every assumption about endurance, stress, and psychological limits. If humans can achieve this level of adaptation to isolation and resource limitation. The military implications alone are staggering, agreed Commander Zector. But the broader implications for our understanding of psychological resilience and optimal living conditions may be even more significant. Alina had completed a section of her current project and was examining her work with obvious satisfaction. She held it up to the light, checking the pattern and evenness of her stitches with the critical eye of an experienced craftsperson. Then she smiled, a genuine expression of pleasure at work well done, and continued with the next section. She's going to complete the full trial duration, said Ambassador Quilana with quiet certainty. Not just survive it, but complete it as a positive experience that leaves her better than when she began. The observation deck had filled with the evening's complement of visitors. Representatives from dozens of species, military advisors, scientists, and cultural anthropologists gathered daily to witness what had become the most studied individual performance in galactic history. "Any word from the Human Exploration Authority?" asked Commander Zector. Dr. Silith's tones carried notes of frustrated curiosity. They continue to provide minimal commentary, standard acknowledgments of reports, but no explanations of Alina's selection or preparation. When pressed for details about human endurance training or psychological preparation techniques, they simply state that Alina's methods are traditional human approaches to life management. Traditional? General Kozak's voice climbed toward incredulous pitches. These are the most sophisticated psychological adaptation techniques ever documented, and they're claiming they're traditional. Perhaps, suggested one of the cultural anthropologists. That's exactly the point. What we're seeing as remarkable adaptation techniques may be standard life skills among human elderly, particularly those who have managed large families and complex social responsibilities over extended periods. The implications of this possibility hung in the air like a challenge to every assumption about human capabilities. If Alina's extraordinary performance was simply the result of skills commonly developed by human grandmothers, we may need to fundamentally revise our entire assessment of human psychological capabilities, said Commander Zector quietly. If this level of resilience, adaptability, and optimization is considered normal among their elderly population, it would explain their species' remarkable expansion rate, agreed Ambassador Quilana. We've been analyzing their exploration and colonization successes in terms of technology and resources, but if their personnel possess this level of individual psychological robustness. Alina had settled into her evening reading time, selecting one of her books and arranging herself comfortably with one of her handmade blankets. Her expression was peaceful, content, the look of someone enjoying a quiet evening at home rather than enduring the final weeks of an extreme psychological endurance trial. 6 weeks remaining, Dr. Silith announced unnecessarily. Everyone present knew the timeline by heart. 6 weeks until Alina would complete the maximum trial duration that no being had ever attempted, let alone successfully finished. 6 weeks until the galaxy would need to acknowledge that their fundamental assumptions about endurance, resilience, and human capabilities had been not just wrong, but spectacularly inadequate. As the observation deck gradually emptied for the night cycle, Commander Zector remained at his post, watching Alina prepare for sleep with her usual calm routine. She arranged her projects neatly, tended her garden one final time, and settled into her bed surrounded by the comfortable, beautiful space she had created through months of patient work. In 6 weeks, Alina would emerge from the trial chamber, and the galaxy would never look at humans or psychological endurance, quite the same way again. Day 180. 6 months. 180 standard galactic days of isolation, environmental stress, and systematic psychological pressure that had been designed to break the strongest military minds in the galaxy. Eleanor Margaret Hoffman, 73-year-old retired teacher and grandmother, sat in her transformed habitat knitting the finishing touches on a celebration blanket while humming what sounded suspiciously like a victory song. The observation deck was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every major galactic alliance had arrived for what was being called the most significant individual performance in recorded galactic history. The Galactic Council had declared the day an official observance holiday. Academic institutions across 12 star systems were broadcasting live feeds to classrooms full of students studying what was now officially termed advanced human psychology. Commander Zector, now bearing the unprecedented title of Director of Xenopsychological Studies, stood at the primary observation station feeling a complex mixture of professional pride and personal awe. He had witnessed something that would reshape military training, diplomatic assessments, and psychological research across the known galaxy. "Final analysis, Dr. Silith," he requested formally. The crystalline being's harmonic tones carried notes of scientific wonder mixed with pure admiration. "Subject Eleanor Hoffman has completed the maximum trial duration while demonstrating sustained improvement in all measured parameters. Physical health indicators show improvement across all categories. Psychological stress markers remain below baseline for relaxed humans in optimal environments. Cognitive performance has enhanced significantly in areas of creative problem-solving, memory function, and emotional intelligence." Through the viewing window, Eleanor's habitat bore no resemblance to the sterile test chamber it had been 6 months earlier. She had created what appeared to be a thriving homestead, complete with an extensive garden producing fresh vegetables and herbs, handcrafted furniture arranged for both function and aesthetic appeal, and dozens of beautiful handmade items that spoke to months of dedicated creative work. "She didn't just survive the trial," continued Dr. Silith. "She transformed it into the most productive and personally fulfilling 6 months of her adult life." Eleanor stood up from her final knitting session and walked slowly around her habitat, examining each area with the satisfied expression of someone reviewing a job well done. She touched various items she had created, checked her thriving garden one last time, and arranged her completed projects with obvious pride. "Computer," Commander Zector addressed the facility's AI, "final psychological assessment. Subject Eleanor Hoffman presents optimal psychological profile for human specifications," the synthetic voice reported. "All indicators suggest she could continue trial participation indefinitely without psychological deterioration. In fact, analysis indicates she may prefer to remain in current environment rather than return to her previous living situation." A ripple of amazement passed through the assembled observers. The possibility that a test subject might prefer to remain in trial conditions rather than return to normal life had never been documented in the facility's 47-year history. "Has she indicated any desire to end the trial early?" asked General Kozak, who had reorganized his entire military training philosophy based on Eleanor's demonstrated capabilities. "Negative. Subject has shown no interest in emergency extraction procedures and appears genuinely surprised during periodic welfare checks that extraction is available as an option." Eleanor had moved to her reading area and was carefully packing her books back into her original knitted bag. Her movements held the slightly melancholy quality of someone preparing to leave a beloved vacation spot. "Attention all observation personnel," announced the facility's communication system. "Trial completion procedures will commence in 30 minutes. All researchers should finalize their data collection and prepare for subject extraction." Ambassador Quilana's translucent form shimmered with something approaching reverence. "She's done it. 6 months of conditions designed to break the strongest minds in the galaxy, and she's finishing healthier and happier than when she started." The extraction procedures were themselves unprecedented. Typically, test subjects were removed quickly and immediately transferred to medical facilities for psychological evaluation and recovery support. Eleanor's extraction required coordination between dozens of research teams who wanted to document every aspect of her transition back to normal interaction. The habitat's environmental systems gradually shifted back to standard parameters. The airlock cycled through its opening sequence. The door that had sealed Alina away from all contact with other beings for 6 months slowly opened. Alina emerged carrying her knitted bag over one shoulder and a small bundle of items from her garden. She paused in the doorway and looked back at the space she was leaving with obvious fondness. "Well," she said to the assembled medical and research staff waiting to greet her, "that was lovely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I haven't had 6 months of uninterrupted crafting time since the children were small." Dr. Silith approached cautiously, her harmonic tones carefully modulated to convey respect and scientific curiosity. "Mrs. Hoffman, how are you feeling? Are you experiencing any distress or disorientation from the isolation period?" Alina smiled with genuine warmth. "Oh, my dear, I feel wonderful, completely rested and so productive. I managed to finish gifts for all 6 grandchildren, complete 3 major projects I'd been putting off for years, and grow the most beautiful little garden. And the quiet time for reading. I got through books I'd been meaning to read for decades." The assembled researchers exchanged glances that transcended species barriers, all conveying the same message of complete bafflement at Alina's characterization of the trial as a restful retreat. "Were there any aspects of the experience that you found challenging?" asked one of the xenopsychologists. Alina considered the question thoughtfully. "Well, the food was rather bland at first, but once I got my garden established and figured out how to improve the flavoring, meals became quite enjoyable. And I did miss my family, of course, but I kept them close in my heart while I made things for them. It was almost like having extended time to focus on showing my love through my crafts." General Kozak stepped forward, his 4 arms arranged in a gesture of profound respect. "Mrs. Hoffman, you have achieved something that no military personnel from any galactic species has ever accomplished. Your endurance and psychological resilience exceed our most optimistic projections for any known being." Alina looked genuinely surprised. "Oh my! Well, I suppose raising 6 children and managing a classroom for 40 years teaches you to make the best of any situation. You learn to find joy in simple things and keep yourself busy with meaningful work." Commander Zector realized he was witnessing something that would become legendary in galactic history. The moment when an elderly human grandmother casually explained that the most remarkable individual psychological performance ever recorded was simply the result of normal life experience shared by millions of human parents and teachers. "Mrs. Hoffman," he said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council and all observing species, I want to express our profound admiration for your achievement. You have redefined our understanding of psychological endurance and individual resilience." Alina patted his arm gently, the way a grandmother might comfort a worried grandchild. "That's very kind, dear. I hope the information is useful. Now, would it be possible to arrange transportation home? I'm eager to see my family and give them their gifts, and my daughter is expecting another grandchild soon. I'll need to start on baby items." As Alina was escorted through the facility for medical evaluation and departure procedures, word of her casual response to completing the impossible trial spread rapidly through the galactic communication networks. Within hours, her comments about the experience being lovely and restful were being analyzed by xenopsychologists, quoted by military leaders, and debated in academic circles across the galaxy. The formal report on Alina's trial would eventually run to over 3,000 pages and become required reading in military academies, diplomatic training programs, and psychological research institutions. It would establish new paradigms for understanding human capabilities and lead to fundamental revisions in how species assessed each other's potential. But the moment that would be remembered in galactic history was Alina's final comment as she boarded the transport that would take her home. "If you ever need someone for a longer trial, just let me know. I could probably manage a year or 2 if I brought more yarn." Commander Zector watched the transport disappear into the star field and realized he had just witnessed the end of an era. The galaxy's understanding of endurance, resilience, and the remarkable capabilities hidden in the most unexpected individuals had been forever changed by 6 months spent observing an elderly human grandmother who had turned the ultimate test of psychological survival into a peaceful, productive retreat. The endurance trials would continue, but they would never again be viewed as ultimate tests of individual capability. Alina had demonstrated that the real measure of psychological strength wasn't in surviving hardship, but in finding ways to thrive regardless of circumstances, and that such strength could be found in the quiet wisdom of those who had spent their lives caring for others, managing households, and making the best of whatever situation they faced. As the facility gradually returned to normal operations, everyone involved carried with them a new appreciation for the extraordinary capabilities that could be hidden behind the most ordinary appearances, and a profound respect for the species that considered Alina's remarkable achievement to be simply traditional human approaches to life management. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from training for battle, but from decades of patient practice in finding joy, creating beauty, and maintaining connections, even when circumstances seem designed to break the spirit. And somewhere in space, heading home to her family, Alina Hoffman was planning her next knitting project and humming contentedly to herself, completely unaware that she had just become the most famous grandmother in galactic history.